I'll just share a little bit about me real quickly. We'll share about the folks that are going to be presenting here too. That'll be a little later. So, who's Hank? Hank's Heinrich, or Henry Lee. So that's how I grew up. But Hank's more playful. That's the playful side of this here today. Hey, I was born and raised here in Boise, Idaho, and I never left. I went to Hawthorne, Eastern Junior High, Boise High, and Boise State. I'm a business major. I'm a fixer. I'm curious. I'm a challenger, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a real estate broker. Been doing that since 2003. And I worked in planning for less than a year at CCDC. So I've seen the inside just a little bit. Former bicycle racer. And heck, I even formed a team called the Boise Stars. I'm so excited about this town. And we won the Elite National Championship Road Race in 2001. Anyway, currently I'm most excited about facilitating men's work, personal growth techniques, and processes for men. So, some real estate, other stuff, personal growth. Something about me. Here's what I'd like to do. Bring us together as a group with levity. And the way that I want to do that is with some laughter. Could you guys laugh with me just a little bit? Yeah? Just be so funny. Greet yourself. Wave at the person next to you and say, "Hi, Brett." Try it. Really, work with me here. Work with me laughing. Join with me. We need to have some levity in this world because there's a lot of seriousness to be had. Seriously, this is so funny. You guys, we can laugh at you. Give it a try. Really barrel into it. We're all here in the library. Can you believe it? This is so crazy. All right. I tried my best. Thank you so much for playing along. All right, so I'm the MC if that wasn't clear. The best I can do is the most I can afford. The price was right. The price was right. All right, so here's the deal. I'm going to read a little bit to you guys. You might notice that there are people here from all walks of life and all political ideologies. It's easy to blame one another, especially political parties, for our problems. But in this case, the problem is that money has too much influence in our local politics. And we need to think more like neighbors. If a house is on fire, I don't care if it's conservative or liberal, or someone else bringing the hose. We'll all cooperate just the same to get the flames out. That's how many of us feel in Boise today. That our homes and community are at risk. That's why we're here. So who's Reject Boise Upzone? Reject Boise Upzone is a coalition of several well-known grassroots citizens groups without financial conflicts of interest. Boise Working Together, Old Hill Road, Protect Boise Neighborhoods, and Vanishing Boise. We support public planning that protects homeowners, renters, the integrity and stability of our neighborhoods, and Boise's unique environment and quality of life. We seek a community-led, consensus-driven zone code that protects neighborhoods while accommodating compatible growth and change. The code should promote true affordable housing and effective anti-displacement programs. New development must not overburden infrastructure. We are building a strong, diverse coalition across Boise to promote land use zoning that benefits all of the city's residents, not just the developers. Okay, so here's some interesting stats about the group. We're not just a fringe group of NIMBYs. Currently have 275 yard signs across Boise right now. We have over 500 people on our email list. We have over 800 people who follow us on Facebook, and we have had 4,500 unique visitors on our website with an average time of 7 minutes spent reading the material. We're bringing awareness to the zone code rewrite, and our Boise neighbors deserve that, and Boise simply hasn't provided it. Yeah, our leadership. So the next piece here is about drawing the connection between Boise, and what we're going to watch is a little video about Austin. So this introduction kind of closes, hopefully, for our gap and seeing what they face and how they felt about it. So this is a little write-up about Austin and how it matches up against Boise. Austin's Code Next versus Boise's Zone Code Rewrite, aka the Upzone. Boise and Austin have much in common. Both have been declared most livable cities. Both have successfully courted high-tech companies. Both have explicitly shaped their land use policy in a quest to attract the creative class, which is a younger, more educated, more mobile, and more urban-oriented caste that is hoped to drive the post-industrial economic growth. Both have seen spectacular rise in housing prices. Both have been the darlings of real estate investors and become some of the least affordable cities now, and lately, leading the nation's housing decline. Boise, however, is still a much smaller city and is often stated to be like Austin a decade or two ago. In fact, there's even a few Austinites that have left their hometown and now live in Boise. A groundswell of opposition defeated the initial Code Next upzone. I think they spent $30 million on that project. You know, Austin not to defeat it, but that's how much they spent trying to rewrite it. 2 years ago, as residents voted out the proponent, and the courts then found the process to be flawed. The details between Austin's Code Next and Boise's upzone vary, but the overall intent is the same: to encourage the conversion of residential neighborhoods to highly dense, typically multifamily development, especially near roadways that in the future may have viable public transit. In both cities, the biggest challenge start at major streets and will entitle the building of all tall apartments several blocks into residential neighborhoods. Residents in Austin were dismayed by single-family homes being designated as, quote, non-conforming uses. Boise's rewrite also had a policy to make building single-family homes in residential incentive areas, end quote, require proof that more units could not be built on the same parcel, but was said to be an error and removed when Reject Boise upzone alerted the press last November. Boise's upzone, like Code Next, entitles much higher densities in these residential areas near corridors, with a nod given towards further expansion into neighborhoods in the future. This change will make the underlying land value become more valuable than many of the existing homes, and catalyze the tearing down in order to build more profitable multifamily rentals or several more imposing, expensive homes on those lots for those who can afford it. Beyond these corridors, Boise will allow many, if not most, lots in the common R1C residential zone to be split, with minimum lot widths being reduced by half and overall size by almost a third. The concerns expressed in this film, Zoned Out, are shared by many Boiseans. We've already seen many long-term residents pushed out of Boise as investors have driven up the cost of housing. Many people are coming to believe that the upzone will make this trend worse and will force a radical change in who can afford and live in a home in Boise. So with that, I think we're now ready to watch the shows.
So we're going to have the two televisions going and just turn the volume off one.
We're trying to sync them. So
Another sync, so work with us here.
one more time. 1, 2, 3.
Does anybody see that red? Yes? It is a profound and potentially historic experiment reshaping a city by zoning. The effort will create massive financial winners and losers, influence the makeup of the population, and ripple change down through the land and the people of Austin, Texas, for years to come.
Honesty is a very precious commodity right now. I asked someone who got a lot of expertise in community planning and code rewrites. How could our city waste $8.5 million on this process? And this person said to me, it's $30 billion in development that we're talking about. How could our city waste $8.5 million on this process? And this person.
I think we need to try to rethink it.
We are not professionals. Okay, I'm gonna unpause mine and you all unpause yours. We'll be pretty close.
Well, we didn't know.
That's.
This one's 141 and this one's 145. So let this one click on first and then go. Turn this one on.
It made very much sense to me that there are stakeholders who would gladly see millions spent on this in order to unlock billions in profit.
Quick pause again.
Upzoning is the tool to turn over a city from one class of people to another.
It's not an enticement for affordability, it's a mandate for profits.
We're talking about developing something new on top of where people already are. So inherently in that plan, if you live there, you're in the way.
We're going to get rid of the people that have always lived here because we've decided that they're not using the land correctly because they're not capitalizing enough, they're not making money off of it in the rate that they think that ought to be made out of it. So they're going to force those people off, and then they're going to bring in new people, and those people are going to get to enjoy it.
There'll be a whole lot of money to be made in Austin, and Austin will fundamentally change. Let's say it will be cleansed. It will be cleansed of low-income people, a lot of middle-income people, and it can become a playground. And the people who service the playground will probably have to live in Pflugerville. It's all about following the money.
Upzoning is when you add entitlements to land use.
Entitlement is how much you can do with a piece of property. That's the core of zoning. What you can build, how much of the land you can cover up, and what you can use it for.
You take a plot right now that you allow a single family home on, and you say, okay, that's limited to this part of the property. You extend it to the lot lines. You raise the height that it can go into. You say that it can be now multiple homes. You say that now it can actually be a commercial business of some sort, or it can be a commercial business and residential properties of some sort. That's upzoning, is when you add entitlements onto a piece of property.
The more entitlements you get, the more your piece of land is worth.
Street in the Allendale neighborhood. You want some cabbage with the salad?
Yeah.
I'm an academic language therapist. I work with students who are dyslexic, teaching them to read, write, and spell. Dave is a retired audiologist and also does some pet sitting on the side. We've been married for 46 years.
We've lived here 15 years now. We love living here because of the trees, the convenience. It's very easy to get to just about every place from here. The neighbors here are very, very friendly.
We're always keeping an eye out for each other.
It's a smaller house, about 1,900 square feet. It fits us perfectly. We have a small backyard, but it's very nice for what we want. We do back up to commercial property.
We are just a block off of Burnett Road.
We're in the transitional zone. For people who are in the transition zone, if this house were to be torn down, to replace this house, you would have to have a minimum of a fourplex.
It's the transition from commercial properties on corridors down to single-family duplex homes. The day the ordinance is released, if you live in a transition zone, you will be out of compliance.
To be out of compliance is a non-conforming use.
That means it doesn't conform to what it's supposed to do.
So you have a single-family residential unit and a multi-family residential zoning. You will be limited to the amount and scope of any remodels, and you can't exceed that. The idea that you have limited a single-family residential use is an anathema to a complete value.
I guess one of the biggest concerns would be, what are we going to do when we go to sell the house? Because we're going to be out of compliance for the zoning as a single unit house. So people who are looking for a single house with a yard and a garage, they're probably not going to be interested in looking at our property.
It puts a lid on a single-family residential house that can only be solved by tearing it down and making multifamily.
They want to do everything they can to make sure that those houses will convert into what they define as a minimum of 4 units.
When you go to sell it, now all of a sudden you have a house that is likely worth more to be torn down and turned into a multifamily.
We're pretty much going to have to sell to a developer, I would imagine.
That brings me to tears, honestly. When we paid this house off, Dave and I discussed, whatever happens in this world, at least we have this slice of land that we can call our own, and this is going to be our home place. I just feel like it's the utmost injustice to people like us who bought a home in good faith that this home would remain here for us.
The minute this happens, a potential increase of taxing on your land goes up with the entitlements on your land.
And property values are going to go up. Property taxes are going to go up.
So every time the taxes increase, it's a lot harder for some people to stay in their homes.
That could very well be that at some point we would have to move just because of the tax liability getting too high.
Let's say, for instance, I said, I've never paid your mortgage. However, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do for you in terms of zoning, and you will like it. And I'm going to tell you how I'm going to increase your taxes. And I don't care if you like it. And I don't want to hear from you. I am Seth Fowler. We're in the University Hills area of Austin, which is northeast Austin. We lived in this area since 1976. I have 3 daughters, 8 grandkids. Of course, they all grown and gone. This neighborhood is comprised of many, many single-family homes. Diverse neighborhood, naturally integrated, beautiful green space. My home is its own single family, as well as all these homes in this area. A home is a way in which wealth is passed down to generations. And so if me as a homeowner with these increased taxes can no longer pay the taxes, then the wealth that my wife and I have accumulated in this home will go to someone else, and our kids and grandkids will have nothing. That's not right. That's not right.
There's some things called compatibility zones, which means if you're in a residence next to a commercial area, the commercial area has to have standards of reduced size next to a residence. The idea came about that that was too much of a burden on the commercial property. The idea was, let's not have these compatibility zones because they're too restricting on the commercial. Let's change the actual neighborhood and the homes by changing their zoning in a way that the commercial properties won't have to have compatibility anymore.
So the compatibility standards are going to be limited, if they're there at all, for the people who own houses right behind us. We could be looking at 8-story buildings going up.
So you might find yourself as a small, modest house surrounded by much larger structures that very much change the way you live.
There are no parking requirements for the first quarter of a mile in.
Right now there's parking tables on how many parking spaces you need for people to go to a business. The whole concept of that was that you would provide adequate parking for the people who need to go to the commercial location. Well, the new concept is if we just eliminate parking, all of a sudden people will ride the bus.
All the parking goes on the street.
You're turning neighborhood roads into parking lots, and they're parking lots without sidewalks.
So now you've got a line of cars covering the streets. EMS comes in, fire truck comes in, fire trucks plant out feet on either side. There's not enough room in the street to plant both feet of a large fire truck.
The idea is that if people can't park their cars and they can walk to a bus, that they'll ride the bus to where they want to go. There's many corridors like Duval in Hyde Park, Enfield in West Austin, Pleasant Valley in Southeast Austin, the long corridors of Burnett and Lamar. There's a whole lot of road involved in this definition. That's a lot of square footage. They define these as being from 2 to 5 lots deep from the corridor. If there's a residential lot right next to the corridor lot, they could change the zoning on that residential lot to the same as what's on a corridor. So if the corridor is zoned commercial at 60 feet, then the first house that backs up to it will be commercial to 60 feet. And then that ripples or dominoes the transition zone further into the neighborhood. There will be a lot more density within a half a mile of these corridors, which basically covers the whole urban core of the city.
Many of us see our entire neighborhoods encompassed by what would be these transition zones.
Many, many, many properties will fall into this category. The communities that will be changed first will be the communities that have modest housing. Modest single-family duplex housing and modest apartment complexes that are providing a lot of the affordable housing that exists in Austin.
Many of the people who are able to stay are people living in public housing or holding onto a property in their family.
Those are the communities that they will focus on to redesign into communities that will be available for the very affluent.
The new opportunities, the new growth, the rapid development that's happening all around them, it's not for them, it's for someone else.
Everyone wants to know, how can I be a part of this growth? Well, you're not going to be a part of the growth. This growth is to serve people that don't live here.
The future that they envision has different people living in it than the people living there now.
We can learn far more about how housing has gotten so expensive in Austin by looking at high-income earners. We had a population the size of Pflugerville move in over the last 5 years that makes 2 and 3 times our median family income.
Of course it makes sense to build only high-end housing in Austin because 80% of the people moving here are high-income people. The average salary of the Google employee is $248,000 a year, and they're coming here like crazy. So why would the developer want to build a product that's less profitable? A big national study has shown that 85% of new urbanist communities are unaffordable to the median income people who lived there before. That tells you that they're remaking the community in something that's unaffordable to even the people who make the median wage.
My dad was married into a boxing family. My grandfather did it, my uncles did it, my brothers, all of my first cousins, they were all boxers. I was just part of the culture. I was walking around the gym at 4 years old, had my first fight at 7, had 100 amateur fights, eventually went out to get signed up with a big company and fight on TV, and it's been a blessing. I can't explain it. My name is Casey Ramos. We're in Southeast Austin. We're on the very southeast edge of Austin, the very border of Austin and Del Valley. It's peaceful, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of congestion, full of hardworking, working class people who get up in the morning, work hard for what they got, and everybody enjoys the way it is. Good old American neighborhood. This house is in the transition zone. This entire neighborhood is in the transition zone. We have 50,000 people in one area code. It's a lot of people. It's a small city, and now we want to quadruple it. Where are people going to park? Where's our fresh water going to stay? We're over a sensitive area. We're over the Edward Aquifer. What's all the concrete going to do to the heat? Like the movie, what's the movie, The Field of Dreams? Build it and they'll come. Yeah, build it and they're going to, yes, they're definitely going to come, but how is it going to be sustainable? Is it going to be practical? Is it going to last? Original Austinites literally built the city. Taxes, a year in and year out, hard work. And you work 20, 30 years to build your house, and somebody's telling you what you can and can't do to your house. It's not fair, it's not equitable. It's a contradiction to the American dream. I want to be a homeowner, and I want to raise a family, like how I was raised. In the environment, in the neighborhood, and in the culture, and the Austin atmosphere, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just, that's the dream, you know, to raise a family and to enjoy the riches and the fun and the exhilaration of Austin, you know, that's what I would like.
The city council set a goal of providing for adding capacity for over 400,000 units in Austin in 10 years. That's about 100 units every single day. Their logic is if you produce like that, you'll provide affordable housing.
Trickle-down economics is a colloquial term for supply-side economics. It's basically the idea that if you increase the supply of something in the economy at large, that ultimately it's going to get to everybody and it's going to benefit everybody. The typical example of that is tax policy. Right? If we cut taxes on the rich, they're going to take that money and they're going to spend it and invest it in creating jobs, and sooner or later, all the people, middle class, poor, working class, will get a piece of that. With housing policy, it's the idea that if we increase entitlements or deregulate land use altogether, that they're going to build and build and build, and suddenly housing is going to get cheap for everybody.
Well, the theory is that you build your way to affordability. You can violate the main tenet of capitalism by just overbuilding to the point that you have a lot of stupid developers that are saying, I'm going to build this house at a loss so it'll be affordable. I hope somebody comes and gets me when that happens. I want to see it.
The market never provides affordable housing. When builders aren't making money building housing, they stop. And in the new ordinance, there's a clause that says that affordable housing only needs to be provided if it's viable for the developer.
My name is Justin Irving. We're in Duplex Nation. It's a little piece of Cherrywood in the middle of Austin, Texas, just on the east side, right off 35. We're a pretty young family. We have a 5-year-old and a brand new 4-month-old, and Jones and July are like, you know, they're pretty much everything to us. The fact that we're just down the street from the school is invaluable to us. The fact that we're in a community that has real continuity and like real community. I've lived in a lot of places where, you know, you didn't know your neighbors, and you sure as heck didn't know anybody else who weren't your neighbors. I mean, the further you got away from your house, the less people you knew. That is definitely not true here. The neighborhood was built in about 1949. Before that, it was a pecan orchard. It's been supporting students and artists and small families for the last probably 60 years. I think the average square foot here is a little smaller than your average square foot around the city. Each unit here is about 850 square feet, so the ability to charge high rents is fairly limited by the space there. I see those demolition permits escalating. I see larger developments, more pricey developments being built all over the neighborhood. If you see housing affordability as a social problem, you can't rely on the market to fix that for you. There are just too many other interests involved other than affordability, and the number one is profit. People my generation and younger, there's an ability for us to be exploited, for people to take advantage of us, and I think that that's one of the things that the supply side folks are doing. They're saying that we have a solution here for you. Now, granted, it's a market-based solution, but it's a solution. We're going to solve your affordability issues. And there's so much need for that on our side. We're at such a perilous place that I don't think that we feel that we can negotiate. I don't think that upzoning the entirety of Austin, increasing entitlements for land development, and essentially making the land underneath us more valuable is going to ameliorate any of those issues. I think it's going to exacerbate them.
It's not about affordability, it's about profitability.
The motivation is allegedly affordability, but it's not there. What is there is the ability to densify in building terms, make the money and move on.
It's kind of a transfer of wealth in a way. They're not taking your home away, but they're changing the use and the value of it. And they hope to provide cheaper land for people to make bigger profits.
One of the highest profit margins is in real estate. That's where the money is. All of these lots represent a 30% profit when they go in, take these lots and build new units. That's the motivation.
It's all about following the money.
I asked someone who had a lot of expertise in community planning and code rewrites, how could our city waste $8.5 million on this process? And this person said to me, it's $30 billion in development that we're talking about. And then it made very much sense to me that there are stakeholders who would gladly see millions spent on this in order to unlock billions in profit. It very easily becomes just a way of extracting wealth and income out of an area or out of an entire population.
It's a greed machine, and there's a wealth extraction equation that is being calculated against people.
It's a gift, and the gift is coming out of the pockets of the people who live here now.
I think this is a classic deregulation debate. When is too much greed and too much accumulation of capital destructive to the entire system itself?
A lot of the trend is to push housing away from being shelter into a monetary investment.
What used to be a family's pocketbook investment is now major investment opportunities for investment firms.
There are different reasons why people buy property. Homeowners and families, consumers, buy it for its use value, right? The usefulness of it. They use it as a home. They're not trying to raise the value of this property. They're trying to just get what it's meant to be, right? They're trying to live there and have the shelter. An investor buys a property to be able to maximize the amount of money that they can make off of it.
Last year, 60% of home sales in the United States were to investors, not to people living in homes.
Housing is not supply and demand. It's an investment tool.
This is not a matter of supply and demand. We know that because it's happening everywhere.
There's plenty of money in other parts of the country, the world, and the state to eat up all the housing that's produced.
It's a matter of capital investment, and it's about the private sector distorting these things. The big problem with housing prices overall right now is that we have seen this massive influx of capital on a global basis into real estate markets because other assets haven't been performing like they have in the past, namely bonds, right? You have trillions of dollars pouring into this, which is why you have a global increase in housing prices, and you have these housing crises and the gentrification crises happening everywhere right now. It's not just in Austin, it's happening everywhere, and that's why local policy changes or zoning ordinances aren't a fix to this any more than a local zoning ordinance can fix any other global problem.
Part of the reason that we're looking at upzoning the entire city is to increase city revenue. City governments all over the United States are making this Faustian bargain where they believe that if they do not grow, they will die. They have built their funding methodologies on a bit of a pyramid scheme where they borrow for the future at rates that would require them to have more people paying in by the time the bill comes due. And we've been heavily involved in that in Austin. To me, when I hear our elected officials talking about how upzoning is going to solve some things, actually the things that I think that they think it's going to solve are those funding issues. They're not housing issues.
On my street, I looked, and my lot is valued at a couple $100,000, a lot more than the house. And the condos down the street are taxed at $6 million. The land is taxed at $6 million.
There's a real simple power of observation that kind of cuts through a lot of this stuff. I've had a lot of conversations about what was being proposed in the land development code with, for example, young people in the service industry. And I say, there's a lot of people who want to give zoning entitlements so that everywhere there's a house, you can put 4. Or allow people to build way more on their property. And I immediately hear things like, oh yeah, I used to rent a house close by here and the owner sold it and they knocked it down and built 4 houses. And all of them cost 3 times more than the one that we were renting.
The community of diverse people, poets and musicians, artists, scientists, government workers, has made Austin a different kind of community than a lot of the cities in Texas. And now there's no value in us anymore, and we need to leave.
You're supposed to back up a U-Haul, load your belongings, and get out so that this land can be used to its fullest capacity.
Why in these neighborhoods that have been so much a part of the culture and the beauty of the city of Austin, why destroy all of them?
The whole culture will change completely? Oh no, that is not acceptable.
Austin's all I know. I've been here for 46 years. I don't like everything about it. I still love Austin, but I may not be able to afford Austin at some point in time. So I may have to move to a place that I don't want to move. It's devastating. Quite simply devastating.
Well, now you know why I wanted you all to start by laughing. Well, to get us back out of this hole, because everything in life is a wave, I brought this handy-dandy cheat sheet for me. This is an emotional wheel. So currently we're all spiraling in anger, aloneness, sadness, afraid, maybe some anger, rushed, bored, excluded, lonely, just anyway. That's the uncomfortable side. I want to get us back to the comfortable side here. Get us back into excited, interested, confident, loving, accepting. And the way we're going to do that is through curiosity. So as long as we hang on to the state of curiosity, then we can stay in an uplated state as to what's to be done. So with that, we have these lovely panelists up here. And I have a little cheat sheet that tells me about each one of them beyond what I might already know. I'm going to start with Lori. Okay? Yeah, Lori DeCari. She's a renter and affordable housing advocate who works a day job at a local housing nonprofit. She's deep in the trenches of our housing affordability crisis, having grown up in Flint, Michigan, a town whose very name is synonymous with social inequity, environmental injustice, and poverty. Lori's dedicated herself to working with organizations that have a steadfast commitment to equality as far as back as she can even remember. She founded Vanishing Boise, which was the first entity to question the all growth is good narrative here in Boise, as well as Boise Renters United, a renter-led online forum for safe and secure housing that gives tenants the information they need to enforce their rights. She has logged hundreds of hours down at the City Hall in all of our benefit at public hearings, supporting tenants threatened with displacement, such as the Reidenbaugh, the Arcade and Traps Apartments, and the Blue Valley Mobile Home Park residents. She's worried about what happens to future vulnerable tenants when they lose the only form available to them to fight for their homes in the upzone when the upzone becomes law. Next is Richard. Thank you so much, Richard, for being here. Richard Llewellyn, did I get that right? Llewellyn? I don't think I've ever said that on a mic before, so. Grew up in the farmland house outside Boise along Hill Road in the 1970s and the 80s. He came back to Boise a dozen years ago to find his family home threatened by the Diamus waste incinerator at the near the landfill, in which Ada County eventually lost $5 million through a failure to listen to the public concerns. His neighborhood was then confronted with the annexation into Boise, which led to an Idaho Supreme Court challenge to the city's approval to the Prominence development without building either of the 2 fire stations, public safety facilities that had been required for 30 years to support the development of Northwest Boise. Richard has a PhD in biochemistry and currently serves as president of the Northwest Neighborhood Association. He also serves on the Citizen Advisory Committee of the Zoning Code Rewrite. His main concern with the upzone is the loss of public input in the local decision-making process. Mr. Kangas. Dave Kangas, he's almost a neighbor of mine. Yeah. Homegrown in the Vista area, he left for 16 years, pursued a career, and returned in 2002. He's been a licensed realtor for 20 years now, active in the Vista Neighborhood Association and long served as a president, a vice president, and a director. Very active in local issues including substandard lots, schools, the F-35 situation that we had passed through town, thankfully. The library initiative, city council, districting, and now helping as a guide, help guide the BNA through the development process over, included 1,300 units and 4 major developments. And last, Chris. Chris Runyon, yeah? Not the yeah, but just Runyon. Unlike today, when Chris purchased his first home in 2006, no one had to compete against investors when buying a home. Fast forward to a few years ago, Chris became concerned when many homes and long-term rentals in his neighborhood were being purchased by investors only to be operated as short-term rentals. He helped start the Protect Boise Neighborhoods and the goal of getting some common sense regulation of these commercial properties, and feels it did help to get an ordinance passed in 2022. He sees the zoning code rewrite as opening the door to more of the commercial activities by allowing neighborhood cafes, retail sales, and bed and breakfasts right in the middle of our neighborhoods. He's worried this will only attract more large-scale investors in the Boise's housing market. He is an avid reader of the Wall Street Journal and other publications reporting on investment trends. Chris is happy to be back living in his hometown and working as a civil engineer as well as serving as a board member on the East End Neighborhood Association and Boise working together. That little read is such a wonderful reminder that it takes a community to make a difference. And we are all operating in the polarity, right? We can't see black without white. So we are all playing a role. So hopefully we can play it well and have our leadership be more representing us. So, our next step here. So, you've got a little check, right?
So we're going to give them just a little quick introduction ourselves on why we're here and involved. I've been following this since they first started the neighborhood conversations. I've probably been to 8 to 10 of them. I've been with meetings with Tim Keene, even the mayor, in following this and trying to figure out a way of actually supporting it. Didn't agree with everything that was coming up. But then last summer, City Council came out and said, well, you're not going high enough, far enough, you need to redo what you're doing. And when they came out with that, after I read it and kind of thought about it a couple days, just trying to figure out exactly what everything meant, it was clear that it was totally about production. It was about turning our neighborhoods in production and producing as many units as possible. And in that process, it was a gut check. I realized that our city leaders really didn't care about the tens of thousands of people that really lived in the neighborhoods already, especially the older neighborhoods that this really impacts, the ones without CC&Rs, that aren't new subdivisions, that have the lowest median sales prices and have lowest income people and some of our lowest rents. It was about moving them out and replacing them with a higher and better use. Your land has value to them, and they have a better use for it, so they just want to move this out and move along. Well, that's why I'm here. I don't agree with it, but I'm one person, so with Boise working together, that hung together after the library initiative, we've kind of been building some opposition. With your support, that's how we make change. Sometimes the government needs to be checked. It's not easy. It takes hours and hours of work and effort and many sleepless nights. But I believe this is a good fight. It's a good fight to fight for your home and your neighborhood and want to see it evolve how you choose rather than somebody else. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Dave, or Kangas, as we call it.
That's it.
Yeah. I'm Richard Llewellyn. That introduction, I think, was pretty good. I did go to the many meetings with the city where I could give some feedback on the citizen, on the rewrite. And I do want to say that, you know, the city's it's a big institution. And a lot of those planners and everything, they work very hard. So keep that in mind when you're trying to give them constructive criticism. However, kind of as was given in that introduction, to me the real problem with this, well, a couple of things. One, even though I would constantly ask for it, being a scientist, where are the data that show that the public process, that changing zoning as we do it now, is getting in the way of building and growing as one of the fastest cities already in the country? Show us the data that the bottleneck is because neighbors are concerned about what's going on in their neighborhood, and they come down occasionally, not all that often, mind you, but occasionally to City Hall and give their opinions and their comments to their elected leaders. Show us the data that that is the problem, and that is what is keeping Boise from being affordable. I never saw any data. I kept asking. And I think that's because this is not the problem. It's not us as neighbors and residents being concerned about how Boise grows that is the problem. If it is, show us the data. We've seen multiple units. In my neighborhood out in Northwest Boise, there are thousands of units at this point probably that have been approved and not built. Some of them not built for years and years. The bottleneck may be in construction. It may be elsewhere, but it's not because we as citizens are getting in the way. So that's, I guess, talking about Dynamis waste incinerator was one big thing. But there are so many issues that really the people who live here understand the issues better than somebody who's working down at City Hall and overworked and overburdened. And this happens time and time again, that it's the people who live in Boise that point out some real problems. Maybe there needs to be a new traffic light. Maybe there needs to be a pedestrian crossing. Maybe we should have access to the river or whatever. It's the people who live here that know those issues. And my biggest problem with the zoning code rewrite is we essentially get rid of all of the ability to have that public input because apparently we're the problem. I just don't buy it. I can go on with that, but right now I think we need to have a city council, and we need to have a city council that is elected throughout the city because this zoning code rewrite very much chooses winners and losers based on geography. So we should have a city council that is representative of the entire city, which we will get this November. I think density, personally, I can see some benefits to density. But how we get there, we just have to do it through public input. And yeah, that I'll just keep going on that. So I'll turn it over to Lori. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, testing. Okay. I'm not quite as slick as these guys, so I'm just going to read my statement. So here I go. I have both personal and professional experience with the rental market, and I'm here to tell you unequivocally that renters are suffering. Over the last several years, Boise has had double-digit rent increases year over year, made nationwide records for the highest rent increases, 40% during a global pandemic year, and has become a fixture in national news stories that address the housing affordability crisis. In an analysis presented to the Boise City Council last year, it said 36% of homeowners and an astounding 67% of renters reported that they can't afford the housing that's the for-profit developers are already producing in our community. That this is happening at the same time that Boise has also been building new residential construction at a breakneck pace tells us a lot. The Boise skyline is a forest of construction cranes, but instead of prices coming down with all this new density as the growth profiteers and supply side evangelists try to have us believe, both prices and displacement have only gone one direction, up. This proves that supercharging even more hyperdevelopment, essentially what the zoning code rewrite proposes, will simply add fuel to an already out of control dumpster fire. Instead of creating housing actually affordable to Boiseans, upzoning will exacerbate the rental crisis, which already features cost-burdened renters, widespread housing precarity, an eviction displacement, and homelessness epidemic. In fact, it's likely that the upzone will destroy more affordable housing than it creates. Developers will simply target our existing affordable housing, the low-hanging fruit of our most affordable neighborhoods, for demolition and redevelopment. By upzoning the city, it is putting a bullseye directly on a remaining affordable housing supply found in much of here, the Bench, Veterans Park, West End, Vista, Southeast, and Northwest neighborhoods. Despite rigorous emerging academic papers, evidence from cities that have pursued this approach, and what we see with our very own eyes that show that merely adding market rate supply actually spurs higher prices, gentrification, and displacement, the city seems undeterred. Opening up our city even further to the whims of global capital, Wall Street, and real estate profiteers will put us on a path to become a city accessible only to the wealthy at the expense of our most vulnerable. Not only does the city's plan squander the opportunity to leverage some affordability in exchange for the massive windfall of profits that the upzone creates for investors and developers, but at the same time it will forever lose our ability to negotiate for affordability on a case-by-case basis. Far from producing any actually affordable housing that we desperately need, this plan is simply nothing more than an investor bonanza, a gift to private profit-making real estate developers that, if enacted, likely won't produce one single unit of housing affordable on Boise wages, but will instead harm renters. We need some guardrails on the upzone, actual affordability mandates linked to local wages, anti-displacement measures, and tenant protections, as well as the preservation of our existing affordable housing stock, and more home ownership opportunities instead of relegating more and more Boiseans into the exploitive rental market. Thanks.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Runyon. I've owned 2 homes, but I've been a renter for 20 years. Everyone in this room has been a renter, right? And I have 2 young sons who are going to be renters. And when I saw a lot of the homes in my neighborhood getting purchased as commercial properties for short-term rentals, it did concern me. So I want to touch on the commercial side first, and then I'll go into lot sizes and that kind of stuff. But I do have concern with these commercial properties. I feel that the short-term rental industry, although it started out as a good idea, has really cracked the door open for commercial businesses being run out of residential homes. And I think this is a case in point. There are new allowed uses, such as neighborhood cafes that serve alcohol, neighborhood retail sales, bed and breakfast, and live-work units in the new code. So, quick questions. Who's going to own these? Are these small businesses, or is this open to anyone? It's not very hard to think that this could be essentially utilized for larger companies, and maybe not the neighborhood cafe you're thinking about. You know, the selling point is a neighborhood cafe probably owned by a neighbor. That the code doesn't have anything in there that's going to restrict that. Taxes. Are these going to be taxed as residential uses or commercial? I could see a huge advantage to running a commercial business out of a residential home and have different tax implications. And then obviously, what's it going to do to the taxes next door? Like if my home is my neighbor home, my home or my neighbor's can be used as a commercial property. As an investor, I'm going to know that. I'm going to pay based on that. So most likely you would see property values to go up as well and taxes to go up well because you've added a use. So when I first heard about the zoning code rewrite, I thought it sounded too good to be true, right? We're going to get affordable housing and a home for everyone. That sounds great. But I looked into it and quickly found that, one, the city's definition of affordability was not mine. Right off the bat, they define affordability in some cases as those making 20% more than the average Boisean. I also found that their claim that increased density would be in strategic locations was actually citywide and not strategic at all. So to start, I live in R1C. I believe it's the largest zone in this town. Right now, the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. An earlier draft was 4,000, and now we're at 3,500. So you can see it's gotten smaller and smaller. So what I call, this is the magic of lot splitting, okay? It's a three-part process. First, we need to reduce the minimum lot size. That's going to make it lucrative to buy a home, demo it, split the lot, okay? So once you find the location, you demo the home, you can split the lot. Now I can build 2 duplexes on each of I can build a duplex on each, right? Because a duplex is an allowed use, okay? So yes, I could appeal it, but it's going to go to a examiner, and all they're going to do is open up that code book, and they're going to say, is a duplex allowed? Yes. Game over. So you might be thinking, okay, how likely is that? Well, I've looked at almost 4,000 parcels in this town so far. Right now, out of those, 10 to 30% of homes in a neighborhood can be split right now. You know, most of the lower value ones have probably already been so or whatever. But when I apply that 3,500, it goes to 80 to 95%. I have a nice graphic over there showing my neighborhood. So, you know, in my neighborhood, 226 homes, you can split 14% now. It's going to go to 94%. That's a 600% increase. Now remember, this is strategic infill. You're barely going to notice it, right? So, and I will say, I mean, it's sad, but it's true. It's not even funny how easy I can pull all the homes, look at what values are lowest, and then I can split, and I can easily start targeting those with mailers and, you know, trying to offer price. I mean, that's what happens. It's not hard to do. The data is there. So I want to say this. I'll just end with this. I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe the city used this type of analysis to determine what lot size was the best as they went from 5,000 to 4,000 to 3,500. I believe they have maps or can make maps for every one of you if you request them, showing what lots could now be split just based on lot size. Not very difficult. It's got to be 25 foot wide too. Okay, they can do that. So I would just highly recommend you guys asking for that, because I think the scope of this, as you saw in this movie, is way bigger than just certain areas of higher density that will, quote, very appropriate to Boise, isn't dramatic changes, as said by Tim Keene of the city of Boise. Thank you, everyone.
Nice work, guys. Well played. And it's here written that audience questions and answer time 7:02. My phone says 7:03. So for a first try, nice work, guys. Yeah, well played. So is this making any questions for folks? You got a question, Brent? Yeah?
Questions and comments. First, I really want to acknowledge each of you for your expertise and your research and your advocacy. Thank you. And thank you too, Hank, for emceeing this. And I'll try to frame this as a question, but one thing that's missing from the documentary, and I think from the code, is the value of land beyond sheltering people, such as trees and butterflies and topsoil, of which is the basis of growing life, which supports us. So I would just want to make the comment or ask you to comment on the value of land for preserving topsoil and trees, more than just sheltering people in boxes.
Who here has an opinion about the tree story? Biggest opinion.
Well, I'm sure a lot of us have opinions on this, and Katie Fight, I don't know if she's here, but she's our, yeah. Well, no, I think it's a great question, and of course, as a city of trees, it's an appropriate question. On one level, it's almost inevitable as you increase density. You know, you're going to lose. You're gonna pave, and you're going to, you know, bury, etc., green space. And the big trees, I think a lot of us see as kind of the biggest loss. Boise is one of 3 cities in the United States that has heated up the fastest the last decade or so. And they call that because of the urban heat island. And it happens when you pave, you cut down your trees, and you convert green space to paved spaces. So I appreciate the comment. Boise, I mean, to try to be constructive, Boise has added a few things to try to mitigate that. One of the things they did say was that you have to have larger trees in parking lots than you do now. Class 3 trees. So that's a good thing. It's the right direction. But overall, I think that there needs to be, if you're going to create these dense areas, you've got to offset it. You got to mitigate. You got to be very proactive, in my opinion, or else it's just going to be more what people fled from. I mean, you know, we have a woman in my neighborhood who came out to Northwest area in 1972. She said she grew up in the projects in Chicago, and she just longed to see something green. And she considered Boise a paradise. And we are in danger of losing that. So, thanks.
Way back there. You want to come up front to ask your question? Because I can't bring the mic to you.
No, just what can we do? Is this going to come to a vote for the citizens, or just a vote on the council? Yeah, what's kind of the game plan? Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for the information. For all the hours you spent. Thank you.
So, by you showing up, by how many people we got on our website now?
I mean, we have 500 people, you know, emails, we have, you know, start with. And then
So, people care. You know, we started out with nothing just a couple months ago. And you care, you show that you cared by showing up here. So realize that this issue is not a one thing and go. It's not send an email in and say you've done your job and go home and hope for the best. I mean, we've been meeting and discussing this for a year and a half. So there is a P&Z hearing coming up where they will take testimony. They are taking comments. It's persistence. Then it goes to city council where they're going to be doing the same thing. Persistence, committed with a sound argument. Rants, you know, are emotional, but we have to have facts and details and ideas, examples of what's happened in your neighborhood. That's what works. And the big thing is, right now, is we have 3 city council districts unrepresented, and they will bear the largest brunt of this rewrite. And that's why they're trying to push it ahead right now. That's just wrong. There's no reason to go through what Austin did. You know, it took citizens almost 4 years to rescind Code Next. Let's get it right the first time. Take the time to get it right the first time. And we have the power to do that, but it takes effort. So emails, phone calls, testimony, grabbing your neighbor and saying, this matters, this is important, printing some flyers, handing them to your neighbor. That's, that's how it works.
I'll just add one thing. I thought that was great. This should be an election issue, right? So there will be candidates for all those seats that are not now represented. We have, it's a mayoral race as well. This should be the issue for all candidates. All candidates should be asked, what is your position on this? Do you think the public should vote on it, or at least should we be seated first before there's a decision? That's, I think, how we kind of catalyze and move forward with that, as well as everything Ken is saying.
You, sir. I'm sorry if I wasn't paying attention, didn't read something, but you just said it took them 4 years to rescind the code. It seems incredibly more difficult to rescind something that's in place. And so I wonder what strategy they used, and could you do that in advance of having it in the first place? And what was it?
You want to speak to it? Would that be referred to Austin?
So I don't believe it was actually enacted, but as they were going through the process, or maybe it was enacted, and then the citizens immediately had a mechanism within their law there to protest.
Statute.
Yeah, and so they were able to stop it from going into place, and then, so that's been, it was 2019, now we're in 2023. As I understand it from my reading and stuff, it's sort of they're doing it kind of piecemeal now, just doing like transition zones or, transit-oriented development or, just different pieces. So it's not the large plan that we're looking at here, because that did get defeated by a lot of citizen backlash, but also, there's still ways for folks to get things through, so.
One thing Austin did wrong is they rezoned all like 190,000 lots throughout the city, but they didn't follow the right rezone process, which gave the citizens an avenue to sue the city. Boise is not rezoning everything. They're just changing the definition of the zones and what's allowed. And right now it feels like there's finally a good active discussion going on and debate. So do we really want to, we don't really want to kill it, but we want to make sure we're getting it right. Make sure that the designs and the densities and the plans that they have set out for us are really what the citizens want. We don't want to get there and then go through that.
I guess I just want to touch on, things you could do. I've been surprised. Well, one, most people have seen the signs. Like, a lot of people have seen these darn yellow and black signs. What's interesting is there's still a lot of people that just haven't taken the time to look at it. So I just would really advocate to, don't be shy of bringing it up. Hey, have you seen those signs? Go to the webpage, that kind of thing. I mean, more people know about it now than they have, which is ridiculous, right? Because supposedly this process has been going on for years.
3 years.
We did go through that thing called COVID. Maybe not the best time to do a public outreach, but that might be touchy for them. But the main thing is, I think the signs are out there. I think people are seeing them, but they aren't connecting the dots yet. So if you guys can help connect those dots just a little bit, and it isn't a homeowner versus renter versus, it's kind of a community of people that live here trying to hold on to something. And the other side is going to use other tactics to make you feel bad for saying something, but don't be afraid of that. That's because they don't have a good argument. So just keep talking to people.
Another question?
What is the mechanism that they are using to get
So I can touch on that. That's part of why I got so involved, because affordability sounded good, but then of course you got to get into the weeds. So when I look at the R1C zone, which is what I've been talking about a lot. So say I buy a lot and I split it, and now I'm going to build something on that lot. Okay, if I want to build a triplex, so bigger than a duplex, I need to sell one of the three as affordable. So a lot of times people think, okay, I'm going to deal with the little density next to me.
You need to rent it. You need to rent it at an affordable price.
No, well, there's two ways of doing it. There's rental and there's for purchase. So a lot of people would say that personal wealth is gained through owning a home, right? I mean, that's what we're all trying to push people to get. So there's two options. You can rent it or for sale it. So if you for sale it, affordable, when you're providing affordable, you're going to sell one of three for someone that makes 120% area median income. So I worked this out. So let's say we got a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Okay, that's a 4-person household, 120%. I come up with about $120,000 a year, and that's the concession that we're getting in our town. We're gonna get one home at 120. So essentially they've admitted that the other two are gonna be more, because if they aren't, then the city's getting nothing. So anyways, that was the for sale.
I think your question was about whether or not how are we leveraging the development industry to give us affordable housing in this process, and the answer to that is we're not, to be honest. That's what I've been imploring the city to do. That's what many other cities have done. It's called land lift, right? Where you change the zoning on a parcel of land and you're allowing higher density, then that's basically a windfall of profits for the development industry. Instead of building one structure, now you can build 3 or 4 or an apartment building. So you're making them so much money, and the city should be leveraging that, right, for the public good. Richard Florida was quoted in that article, Patrick Condon, these are academic people, opinion leaders about this stuff, if you want to Google them, and they say we should never be rezoning or upzoning without mandating affordability, and we're not mandating affordability. There's no mandates in here at all. It's just they threw in some incentives, quote unquote, in the end of this process, where if you build a quadplex, 4 units, then some percentage of that, if you participate and you want to do this, then it could be affordable, or that if you want those extra units, and you could make them affordable. But what might happen is that they won't do that, right? They won't want to participate and help us as a community to get some affordable mixed income housing in our community, to help the city, to achieve these goals, to alleviate the affordable housing crisis that we're in now. So that's why in my presentation I say about that question that we might not get one single unit of affordable housing, since we're not mandating it. It's their choice whether to participate.
I want to add just something real quick to that. We talk a lot about what the powers are that the state of Idaho allows cities, and you hear Boise talk often about how they can't do this or can't do that. But right now there is a very powerful tool that the city of Boise has, and that is on any rezone. So whenever a developer comes and says, I want to make more money off of this parcel, I want to have it rezoned, the city and the state of Idaho gives them this power, gives us this power. The city can write a development agreement to go along with that rezone. And that development agreement can be about anything the public benefit, really. It could be implementing the comprehensive plan in ways that we can't do otherwise because it's not an ordinance. Or it could be negotiating for affordable units. So that is something that we have now. We have that power. But once you upzone everything all at once, we entirely give away that power. So when you hear the city of Boise complain, state of Idaho's always taken away our power, well, this is the biggest power they have right now, and we apparently are willing to give it away entirely.
quick comment is, there are incentives built in here for developers to bring in affordability. In order to get so many units, you have to have some affordability and sustainability. But they also always have an out to do the easy path. Why is a developer going to take on the oversight and regulation of dealing with the city of Boise on an affordable unit, and the city telling them how to build their unit for sustainability? Well, if they just go left, they might not get all the units, but they don't have any oversight. They just get to go build. And when you're building duplexes or duplexes right now, it's not a 2-bedroom duplex or a 3-bedroom duplex. You're seeing 8 to 12-bedroom duplexes, so they can make that up quickly.
Any questions?
I've actually become more aware since doing research on this, and I'm looking around my neighborhood, and I'm seeing these empty lots. You know, like there was a house one time, 2 months ago, and now it's an empty lot. And I'm wondering if they are doing it, and also I've looked into Stewart and 27th Street, which is exactly what you're talking about here. It's just a mess. Parking, you can't even drive through it. And so I'm wondering, so I went on the planning and zoning and tried to find out what they were going to do with this one piece of land that's empty now. It's on U-Stick. And do you have any suggestions of easy ways to see what they're doing so that maybe we can, combat it now? Is there anything we can do that way?
That's kind of complicated because it's really hard to say exactly what happened with that lot. But right now, all across the city, because we're in an economic downturn, you don't know how long this is going to last. The housing market has slowed down considerably. I'm seeing projects all over my neighborhood stopped because the financials aren't working out. And you have to admit that, well, if I wait 6 months, maybe I can double up on what I'm doing. So it's a combination of things right now that developers are pulling projects and sitting on them because, the money isn't out there. The environment isn't right to keep forging ahead, and maybe if they wait, they make a lot more money.
Is there a way that we can find that out?
Not until they apply, not until there's an application.
In terms of demolitions, right now, what is it, 3 years? I think, so the city doesn't want existing affordable housing to be demolished. They're trying to prevent that in their newer rewrites, give them some credit, but it's a hard thing to stop. So when I hear that, I think, somebody might be thinking ahead. If they demolish it now, 3 years later, I believe it's 3 years right now, then they will go past that window where they might have been penalized for the demolition. So that's always possible as well.
Sitting next to you.
Me?
Yes, please.
I guess it's more of observation and comment. So I live in West Boise. Do you know where Capitol High School is? What is it, Goddard and then Maple Grove? There's this cute little house that had dog fishing, and you couldn't get in. It was right next to the stoplight. I noticed a commercial real estate sign in the front, and one day I just decided to look at it. It's already built out. There's already plans. I looked at Zillow.com. I know real estate agents hate that, but I looked at Zillow.com, and they already have 2 apartment complexes ready to go in the middle of an established neighborhood. And then I noticed another one. Yeah, it's happening already.
Yeah, it's like we don't need to change the rules. Why are we, for me, that's the curious question. The curious question is, why are we here? Who's foisting this upon us? Where's that energy from? The question is, city's reactionary. They respond to the citizens we'd like them to, but they're responding to something else here. And what is that? Is it they're saying something into the future that is troublesome to them, like finances? And that's what's inspiring? I don't know the answer, and that's a great question to be curious about and asking. Why are we pursuing this?
Sorry.
I think I gotta get another question back here.
I just wanted to tell the one lady, call the planning department. Their job is to help the citizens and the developers. Just call City Hall. So you want to speak to someone. The general staff, both at our City Hall and at Ada County, I found to be extremely helpful. More in Ada County than the city, but still, the general staff, not the elected, not the power players, their job is to help the citizens. Call and say, hey, here's the address. Can you look this up for me and help me find out if anything's going on with that? They'll do it and they'll let you know, and that'll give you a starting point.
Excellent, thank you.
In the back.
I just want to say thank you. I only know you from online, and your names are amazing. I want to get really clear. So there are no requirements for affordable units, only incentives. Correct. No requirements. Okay. Because other people might be encountering this too. I mean, I'm having a really hard time spreading the word to people who are really sold on this idea that it's going to create more affordable housing and, slow down homelessness and everything. And it just kind of feels like a tough argument.
I think that's by design, to be
Yes.
honest. Yeah, it's predicated on simply building more housing makes housing affordable, and that's not true because as I said in my presentation, we've seen tons of building going on in Boise and house prices are skyrocketing. It's also predicated on the thought that a smaller footprint house, right, instead of a single family house, if you're just building a smaller unit, that would be affordable. That's also not true. And so, yeah, and I think, the city puts like something about demolitions and something about affordability, and it's just enough if you're just skimming the surface to be like, oh, they've addressed affordability, oh, they've addressed demolitions, oh, they've addressed trees, oh, they've addressed displacement, but they haven't really put in a good protective policy that actually helps or does those things that they claim that they're doing. And that's the problem, that most citizens aren't going beyond that surface level to understand that. So it's good to keep pointing that out.
We've got about 3 minutes left. In the back over there.
Yes. I just read the book. Page 253. Bodybuilder Manny, parking is my red flag. Every one of the listings on here, fourplexes, threeplexes, whatever, single family, they're only asking the developers to put in one parking spot on premises. This is very simply to allow developers to maximize profits. Okay? When you're out talking to people about this, all you have to, what's the upzone? All you have to tell them, the city is working for developers to maximize profits, and they're only requiring one parking spot per household. Are you ever going to have visitors? Are you ever going to have a boat? Are you ever going to have a camper? Every house in Boise almost right now has two families in it, or your kids have moved home, or your parents have moved in with you. One car, that's all we get.
And better than that, it doesn't specify like based on streets. So some streets in Boise are really narrow. I live on one. And there's no distinction about the parking there. So the street that I live on has large lots at a really small street. So you'll maximize the density on the street, but there'll be nowhere to park on the street. We already struggle seeing the trash truck come through. We like that, it keeps traffic slow, but if we were to add the density that's being imagined here onto our street, it's gonna get crazy, and there's nothing in there about the size of the street. More questions? Got one more?
Where are the income numbers coming from? That seems absurd.
Well,
So if you Google it, like Boise City income guidelines, they have a page on their website. So they actually have the numbers from Boise right there. So I recommend that you do it, and it actually breaks it down by like 60%, 80%, 100% AMI. Whenever you're talking about affordability in the industry, they always are referencing the area median income and a percentage of that. It's not like a number like you're paying $1,500 in rent or something. So the citizens have to somehow translate that into, do this math and look up these charts and whatnot, which adds complication, and again is why we can accept that it's affordable. The word affordable has no actual dictionary definition meaning. So that's how you'd find out. I had another thought about that, but I've forgotten what it is. Maybe I'll pass it.
I'll just mention something else you might start hearing, and I think it's because of the pushback for when they use 120% of area median income, pretty quickly people are like, whoa, like that is not even what I'm thinking about. So there's this term called the missing middle, right? So now that's the new term. It's a way to like soften the 120% area median income and make it feel like there's this other class of group people that's who we're targeting now. We're not targeting those other affordable people. Now we're targeting the missing middle, and it's a thing. Like straight up, there's a whole push for it. So it probably will come up, and that's how they kind of justify it.
My other point was, and then the other thing to know about AMI is it's constantly being driven up, especially in the current dynamics that we have, where you have poor people being displaced and leaving Boise. So, and then you have wealthier people moving here. So in 2019, when I first became aware of this, it was like $49,000 a year for a single person, and now it's $62,000 for a single person. So that's 4 years later. That's like significantly different, a huge difference. So
since we're on the trend of money, because we're at the completion here, I'd like to take more questions, but I've got written here 7:30 is the deadline. Yeah.
We have to be out by a certain time.
But I have a donate message here, the Boise Working Together website, boiseworkingtogether.com, and also you can mail a check to the P.O. box that's written on this page on your way out if you took a picture of it. That may be a great way to go. It's probably also written on the website. Because we can't take donations here. It's a library, and Boise City wants 50% of the donation. No, that's not what's up. So I'll just put this right here on your way out. You can take a picture if you want it.
Just watch the website. If you've registered, we have your email address. We will be doing another event. Another event will be more targeted towards specific issues and concerns you have with your neighborhood. It'll be more open house style and more time. We are learning as we go, and there's a lot of issues to cover, and we feel there is a lot of people that just need some help to understand what is happening, and that's what we're trying to do. So thank you for your support so far.
One more thing.
The questionnaire will help a lot if you filled it out. That helps us understand what your concerns are, so we have some data to work with. That's not on.
Oh, and I just wanted to say too, I know probably people have a lot of questions and they want to come up and talk to us or talk to your neighbor, but we really need to get out of the building. The librarians were very specific about that. So, you could stand outside up front and chat with people. We'll be coming out there too if you want to talk to us. So.
Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, everybody.
We have to put chairs away.